Reddit calls itself the front page of the internet. Open, decentralized, run by the people. The Roman Senate called itself the guardian of the republic, elite, exclusive, run for the people. One claims to be democratic and isn't fully. The other claims to be aristocratic and, in practice, had to constantly court the crowd it supposedly ruled over. Both institutions lied to themselves about their own power in almost identical ways. That contradiction isn't an accident. It's a clue to how public opinion actually gets shaped, then and now. Imagine deleting every filter between you and the truth. No editors, no rankings, no moderators, no senators. Just every person shouting everything they know, all at once, with nothing to sort it. At first that might sound like freedom. Total information, no gatekeepers. But within seconds, it collapses into noise. You can't find what's true. You can't find what matters. You can't even find what's real. This is the problem every large society eventually runs into. Once a group gets too big for people to witness events firsthand, somebody has to decide what the group believes happened. That decision is never neutral. Whoever filters the information holds real power, even if they never hold a formal title. Rome faced this problem 2,000 years ago. Most citizens never saw the battles, treaties, or scandals shaping their world. They only knew what someone told them. Rome even built a public daily record, the Acta Diurna, a kind of ancient bulletin listing official events and rulings for anyone to read. The instinct to filter reality for a crowd never disappeared. It just changed shape. Today, that same problem plays out across platforms built to sort attention for millions of people at once, including Reddit. So Rome built a filter. But who decided what went into it? And why did that power stay so easy to overlook? To understand how Rome filtered reality for its citizens, you have to understand what the Senate actually was. It wasn't a lawmaking body in the way we think of legislatures today. For most of Roman history, the Senate couldn't pass binding laws on its own. Its real power was something quieter. It shaped the terms of political debate, and through that, it shaped what counted as acceptable public opinion. Roman citizens rarely heard directly from the Senate. Instead, information moved through public gatherings called once, where politicians and orators addressed the crowd. What got said at these gatherings, and how it got said, mattered enormously. This is where Rome's information problem meets one of history's most skilled communicators, Cicero. Cicero didn't just report facts. He ranked them. He decided which details deserved emphasis and which deserved silence, using rhetorical skill to push certain interpretations to the front of the public's mind. In a very real sense, Cicero's oratory functioned like an early ranking system, elevating some ideas over others before they ever reached the average Roman. Then there was the Acta Diurna, Rome's closest equivalent to a curated public feed. According to the ancient historian Suetonius, its publication expanded under Julius Caesar, who used it to make the daily business of government more visible to the public. It was posted in public spaces, listing selected official proceedings, trials, and events. But the key word is selected. Someone decided what belonged in that daily record and what didn't. The Acta Diurna wasn't a mirror of Roman life. It was a curated version of it, filtered through the judgment of whoever compiled it. This reveals something important about how Rome solved the filtering problem. It didn't rely on a neutral system. It relied on trusted individuals. Senators, orators, and officials earned public confidence through reputation, a quality Romans called Auctoritas, or accumulated personal credibility. The public didn't evaluate raw information for themselves. They evaluated the people presenting it and decided who deserved to be believed. This meant Roman public opinion was only as reliable as the character and motives of whoever held that trust. If a senator's judgment was sound, the public benefited. If it wasn't, there was no algorithm, no independent check, nothing standing between a flawed source and the beliefs of an entire city. The filter was entirely human, entirely personal, and entirely dependent on trust in specific people rather than trust in a system. Rome solved the filtering problem with elite gatekeepers and persuasive speech. Centuries later, a very different kind of institution would try solving the same problem by removing the elites altogether and letting the crowd rank itself. What happens when you remove the human gatekeeper entirely and let millions of strangers vote instead? That's the experiment Reddit represents. Reddit's core mechanism looks nothing like Rome's. There's no senator, no orator standing in a public square. Instead, users submit content, and other users vote it up or down. Posts that get more upvotes rise. Posts that get downvoted sink. On the surface, this looks like democracy in its purest form. Millions of individual choices adding up to a collective judgment about what matters. But that surface picture isn't the whole story. Reddit's ranking isn't a simple popularity count. Its algorithm weighs factors like how recently something was posted and how fast it's gaining votes, meaning two posts with the same number of upvotes can rank very differently, depending on timing and momentum. Those weighting choices were made by engineers, not by the crowd. The crowd votes, but the rules of the vote were designed by someone else. Then there are moderators. Reddit is organized into thousands of individual communities called subreddits, each run by volunteer moderators who can remove posts, ban users, and set rules specific to their community. Reddit itself has stated that it relies on roughly 100,000 active moderators managing content across the platform. That's a strikingly similar structure to Rome's Senate, a relatively small group of people holding outsized curatorial power over what a much larger population sees, even though neither group holds formal, centralized authority over the public they're serving. This is the core tension in Reddit's design. It presents itself as democratic, community-driven, and neutral. Its own long-standing tagline calls it the front page of the internet, language that implies it simply reflects what people care about rather than shaping it. But every part of that front page, from the ranking algorithm to moderator decisions to platform-wide content rules, involves choices made by a small group of people who aren't accountable to the broader public in any formal sense. So Reddit didn't eliminate elite control the way it might appear to. It reorganized it. Voting gives the appearance of the crowd deciding everything, but the architecture underneath, the algorithm's weighting, the moderator's authority, the platform's rules, still determines what the crowd even gets to see and vote on in the first place. That's the same basic dynamic Rome had, a small group shaping perception for a much larger population, just wearing a completely different costume. Rome used oratory and reputation. Reddit uses code and volunteer moderation. On the surface, an ancient empire's Senate and a modern website's comment threads couldn't look more different. But strip away the costumes, and you start seeing the same skeleton underneath. Strip away the togas and the usernames, the courier routes and the servers, and ask a simpler question. What are these two systems actually doing mechanically? At their core, both Rome and Reddit are running the same three-stage process. First, input filtering. Something has to determine what even gets considered in the first place. In Rome, this happened through official reports and public gatherings, where only certain events and speakers made it into the conversation at all. On Reddit, this happens the moment someone submits a post. Not everything in the world becomes a Reddit post, just like not everything happening across the Roman world made it into a speech or the Acta Diurna. Second, ranking and legitimizing. Once something enters the system, it needs to rise or fall in importance. Rome did this through oratory and senatorial endorsement, where a skilled speaker like Cicero could elevate one interpretation of events over another. Reddit does this through karma and algorithmic ranking, where votes and engagement determine what climbs toward visibility. Third, enforcement and removal. Both systems also needed a way to suppress what they didn't want elevated. Rome had censorial powers and, in extreme cases, practices like damnatio memoriae, the formal erasure of a disgraced figure's public record. Reddit has moderator removal and platform-wide bans. Different tools, same function, deciding what disappears. This three-stage architecture, filter, rank, remove, isn't unique to Rome or Reddit. It's the basic skeleton of any institution that manages information for a population too large to witness events firsthand. Once you see it, it becomes obvious in far more places than just these two. That shared architecture reveals real similarities. Both institutions claim more neutrality than they actually have. The Roman Senate framed itself as serving the Republic, even as its members actively shaped what the Republic believed. Reddit frames itself as simply reflecting its communities, even as its algorithm and moderators actively shape what those communities see. Both rely on small groups holding outsized influence over much larger populations, senators and orators in Rome's case, moderators and engineers in Reddit's. and both use reputation as an informal trust signal. Roman Auctoritas, a person's accumulated credibility, functions similarly to Reddit karma, a rough, imperfect proxy for whose voice deserves attention. But the comparison has real limits, and it would be dishonest to smooth them over. The first is scale and speed. Roman information moved at the pace of a courier on horseback or a ship crossing the Mediterranean. Reddit content can reach millions of people worldwide within minutes. That difference isn't cosmetic. It changes how much time a filtering system has to catch and correct errors before they spread beyond control. The second difference is accountability. Roman senators held named, legally defined public office, at least nominally answerable to Roman law and tradition. Many Reddit moderators are anonymous volunteers with no formal accountability structure at all. That changes the risk calculation for anyone holding gatekeeping power. The third difference is visibility of bias. Roman rhetorical bias was open. Everyone listening to Cicero knew he was trying to persuade them. Reddit's algorithmic bias is largely hidden inside code that most users never see or evaluate, which arguably makes it a more concealed form of the same power Rome's orators wielded openly. These differences matter, but underneath them sits something both institutions share, something almost no filtering institution in history likes to admit about itself. Every system that filters public opinion tends to describe itself as a neutral conduit for the truth, when it's actually an active participant in constructing that truth. Rome called itself the guardian of tradition while actively shaping what tradition meant through selective memory and rhetoric. Reddit calls itself the front page of the internet, language that implies neutrality, while its design actively determines what that front page contains. This isn't necessarily deliberate deception. It may be closer to a structural requirement. A filtering institution that openly admitted how much power it held over public belief would risk losing the very trust it depends on to function. So the self-image of neutrality isn't incidental. It's part of how these systems survive, which leaves a broader lesson, one that has nothing to do with Rome or Reddit specifically. Any group large enough to need a filter will always have one. That part isn't optional. The real variable is how visible that filter's power is to the people relying on it. The question worth asking isn't whether a filter exists. It's what that filter is optimizing for, and who benefits from nobody asking. So here's the question worth sitting with. What's the filter in your life right now? The one you trust so completely that you've stopped noticing it's even there? Maybe it's a news app. Maybe it's a group chat. Maybe it's the very platform you're watching this on. Drop it in the comments. I want to know what filter you didn't realize you'd stopped questioning.